The Importance of Martin Luther King Jr. by Adonai.
We got January 18th off of school, right? But why do we have the day off? Because it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day, right? But we shouldn't just have the day off without no idea who this man was and what he did to change the course of African American history. He has his own day that closes schools, federal offices, and many workplaces. But who really is this man? That's what I, Adonai, want to inform you about today. Who Martin Luther King Jr. was, and how you can acknowledge Monday, January 18th as his day, being conscious of the struggles he faced to bring about great changes in equality to this country to make it what it is today. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929, and he grew up to become a Baptist minister at his father's church in Atlanta, Georgia. He moved on to become a civil rights activist who made a big impact on race relations in the United States beginning in the mid-1950s. His goal was to make the country aware that racism was a problem that needs to be resolved, shown through segregation and many unfair laws that were against people of color, especially in the South. He sought to end racial discrimination and segregation in the U.S. He wanted racial equality. To reach these goals, he told African Americans that they would need to fight for their rights. But Martin Luther King wanted to fulfill this objective with a more nonviolent approach. So what did Martin Luther King do to achieve his goals that made him so great? This time period was filled with the struggle of civil rights, racial discrimination, and was an era of protest. Martin Luther King played a big role in the civil rights movement, leading non-belligerent protests, boycotts, and campaigns. He created the Southern Leaders Christian Conference in 1957, which encouraged and helped with the nonviolent civil rights activities in the South. He led the Montgomery bus boycott in 1957, which fought against the law that segregated buses so blacks would be forced to sit in the back so that their white peers would get better seats. Because of this reason, many blacks refused to ride the bus until the system was changed. After a year of this boycott, and when the bus company lost its profits, the bus system changed the law. Fact is, he went to jail 29 times for fighting for his rights and trying to end segregation, which was considered illegal at the time. He usually got bailed out, or the jail would let him out after a few days. But even being jailed didn't stop him from peacefully protesting. Once in Birmingham, Alabama, he was jailed for his actions. City officials wanted him to wait to continue his work in their city. As he sat in jail, he wrote the most famous letter for Birmingham jail, which told the world about his idea of nonviolence to accomplish his goals. As for waiting, he wrote, "We have waited for more than 340 years constitutional and God-given rights. The nations of Asia and Africa are moving with jet-like speed toward gaining political independence. But we still creep at horse and buggy pace toward gaining a cup of coffee at a lunch counter." King was one of the Big Six, the six core civil rights leaders who helped organize the Great March for the freedom and jobs. On August 28, 1963, around 250,000 people from all across the country came to Washington and marched a mile-long march from the Washington Monument to the Lincoln Memorial. They marched for freedom, jobs, demanded political and economic justice for all Americans, and desegregation in all public areas. At the March on Washington, he would give one of the most famous, powerful speeches of all time, the "I Have a Dream" speech. This is what would make him the great person he was looked on to be, and would become the brink of change that would make the country the way it is today. In this speech, he refers to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, stating that all men, black and white, were promised unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And he wants to give a better access to this promise, which hasn't been applied to black Americans. King says that we will fight for freedom and justice until we get these rights. He asks, when will we be satisfied? And he says, we won't be satisfied until blacks aren't concerned about police brutality, hotels don't turn them away, signs don't say whites only, Voting rights are universal and until justice is served. In this speech, he seeks for a nation where all ancestors, former slaves and ancestors of former slave owners will hold hands, and black boys and black girls will connect with white girls and white boys. A nation where people won't be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. After this speech, he worked hard and passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which banned segregation in the face of race, religion, and background in all public areas. But the fight wasn't over yet. 2 years later, MLK led protesters on the 54-mile march from Selma to Montgomery to fight for the ability for black voters to get a fair vote. After multiple attempts to march and encountering deadly violence from troops and white segregationists, King finally led his protesters on the long journey with the help of President Lyndon B. Johnson, who sent protection in the form of the National Guard. This led to the voting rights bill that passed in Congress, called the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which prohibited any voting practices that stopped people from voting, like literacy tests. Because of all his hard work and dedication, he is considered one of the most influential African American leaders in all of history and won many honors, including the Nobel Peace Prize. I could go on and on about the many great things MLK did, but the list would be very long. I want to get a good point across. Without Martin Luther King, you wouldn't be sitting in a classroom with your fellow black friends, and you probably wouldn't even have them. Blacks wouldn't be allowed to vote, sit down wherever they like, drink and eat from the places they want. I and my family wouldn't even be considered human. But King changed that view. Abraham Lincoln gets the credit for the mighty accomplishment of freeing the slaves, but King, he enforced the word free to make it more true, more real. He gave us that promise of freedom and transformed it into reality. He told us, fight until blacks are truly free. Yes, we are free, physically, but not mentally. There are still racists in our country trying to wipe King's dream, the American dream, from the face of the world. We may be able to freely eat lunch at counters and ride city buses, but when it comes to the law, blacks are still treated with brutal unfairness. The facts speak for themselves. In 2020, 226 black men and women died in the hands of the police. This rate of fatal police shootings among black Americans is much higher than any other ethnicity. Martin Luther King knew that for us to be truly free, to live our lives, this has to stop. He said, "We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality. Because of this man, we will continue to fight for our rights and achieve freedom and justice. We will change this country, the United States of America, to the land it is said to be, the land of the free." Thank you.